Hello everyone, welcome to Not Yet Uhuru. We are still in New York for the CSW62 conference, United Nations. But today we are doing reflections on the entire conference and the time that we spent here. And I'm with the also beautiful, also witty, also woman crushy Wednesday, Lebo Ramafoko, who's the CEO of Soul City. And she's with us, with me the entire time while we're getting footage and doing podcasts for Najid Uhuru, which we've shared with you guys, and hopefully you're still engaging on social media. Facebook, don't forget, Soul City Institute, on Twitter, soulcity_SA. And namhlanje senza reflections on the entire conference.
Yeah, as Naledi said, I'm Lebo Ramafoko, and we are going to wrap up and just give you a reflection of our attendance of CSW 62, what we learned, what we saw, what our ideas are. I guess for me, I want to start by saying this was the first time that I came to CSW. Quite overwhelming.
Yes,
because there are so many delegates from so many different countries. And there's so many things that are happening all at once.
Yes.
But I must say that this is a great platform.
I agree.
For civil society organizations to participate. And I say that for a number of reasons. One, I think the work that we do in our respective countries matter. And we need to come and represent what we do in our countries. But I also think that for me, it was a learning experience around geopolitics.
All right.
Because when you listen to what we do in South Africa on a global platform, it's actually quite progressive.
Yes.
If you look at our constitution, if you look at our stance as a country around LGBTIQ issues, I think the problem, as many of the podcasts we shared with you will show, is the implementation.
Yes.
You know, and I dare say political will to implement the laws and the policies that we already have. Some, in fact, most of them underpinned by a great constitution.
Definitely. And what you're saying is very true, actually, because I think being here also made me realize that the work that's done by civil organizations is actually so immense, and we sort of almost undermine it, when in actual fact it's these spaces that keep the country afloat, or rather keep the conversation ongoing. You know, I saw that there was a lot of dissatisfaction, you know, amongst young people with our governments, you know, globally. In fact, it's a global dissatisfaction, and with the UN CSW62 conference coming together, you know, and hashing things out as civil society and as the youth, you know, to create one agenda for all of us, and, you know, most importantly, centering women living in rural areas. I think that's one of the most progressive conversations that we've had. In fact, there were other nuances that kept on coming out even in that conversation, like the issue of differently abled bodies, people with disabilities who don't get education. 90% of those people don't get education. You know, the issue of widows, you know, which have now been included in our conversation, you know, and going deeper into the complexities of being queer and living in African countries. You know, there were so many conversations that we had to navigate through, which we hadn't had an opportunity, or rather the enlightenment to go into deeper than we did at the UN conference. So in that light, for me, definitely worth it. A lot, actually.
So I think the other conversation for me, which I found very interesting, and I must admit, I think my own knowledge is very limited, is the issue of land.
Yes.
Because when we speak about rural areas, we are speaking about land. And if you go onto social media, I've been chuckling when I look at Twitter, for an example. That there are so many comments about land. And I think the idea that, you know, we are going as a country for land without expropriation has brought out the most sensational responses. But I'm wondering where they come from. Okay. But I think this conversation at CSW has also made the issue of land a very central issue. because forget, the racialized, emotive discussions that South Africans are having right now about, does it mean white people are going to be sent away? Will government be able to manage the land, and will everybody get land? But even the executive director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, at the youth forum on Saturday, spoke about two issues that may even, in her words, dissolve or break CSW, and it was the question of land and women's ownership, and also sexual reproductive health and rights. But sticking with the issue of land, I think for me it became very apparent that, like with democracy, we cannot be, there's gonna be land without expropriation, without asking the nitty-gritty questions. If women, and particularly young women, are not heard by chiefs, and for many of them who live in rural areas, that land is in the custodian becomes the chiefs. What does land expropriation look like? That is pro-women and pro-marginalized women. I think that discussion for me is a discussion I found for me very, very important.
It stands out for me as well because it's one we couldn't completely answer fully. In the sense of how do we ensure that women or girls living in rural areas also have a stake in this conversation and are not just looking from outside, but become participating and active stakeholders in the discussion and in the implementation. Especially because we also realize that there's a problem, not only the legislation is good. We also agree on that. We have good legislation in most countries in Africa, especially South Africa. But the problem,
I don't know most countries in South Africa. I mean, in Africa. I wouldn't say most countries in Africa, because some people.
I mean, in the sense of discrimination. I think because that's the umbrella term that people use to silence down the issue with what happens if we don't use the exact word in our constitution or in
but
our
let's
in our
face it,
legislation.
South Africa is leading. I think that's what I'm saying.
Yes, definitely.
Africa does not have, not many African countries have good legislation. We spoke about termination of pregnancy. Many countries. It's a crime. Not only is it illegal, it's a crime
to be queer too.
It's a crime to be queer. A lot of countries do not have social security, the grants that we spoke about, and yet South Africa has. So we do have progressive laws. Let's talk about implementation, which
that's
is
what
the
I
problem.
was coming to. That's what I was coming to.
All right, but I just wanted to say we are leading. A lot of African countries are still lagging behind in terms of policy. We need to ask ourselves, why is there no political will to implement because we should be far in terms of the lived experience.
That's exactly what I was coming
many
to.
young women.
Literally on the nail. That's what I was coming to in terms of we can see that in South Africa we have sort of progressive, laws and legislation, which I still feel there still needs a conversation around that. From whose perspective are we calling it progressive, right? Because I still feel it's from whiteness, white academia, not necessarily girls in rural areas that we refer to this legislation as progressive. But the issue that stands out the most, what is a law if there's no implementation?
Well, that is true.
What do we do with the constitution that is seen as the most progressive in the world, but a girl in a rural area is not part of the conversation, or rather does not have a benefit from that paper? Where do we start moving from legislation, conversation into implementation? I think that's our biggest issue to resolve, actually. How do we implement?
The good thing though, and I differ with you slightly when you say policy from whose perspective, because really let us give credit where credit is due. I think a lot of work by a lot of NGOs and a lot of activists pre-democracy went into crafting a lot of this legislation. I'll give you an example.
It doesn't mean that they don't have a white perspective though.
But I think for me, where you center the priority is important, okay? Because I'll give an example about termination of pregnancy. Okay. From a public health point of view, whether it's white or black centeredness, it makes sense to offer legal and safe abortions. Okay? And we've got that law in South Africa. And yet illegal providers are thriving in South Africa because a service provider, a nurse, A hospital can basically say, because of my conscience, because of my religious beliefs, I am going to deny a woman the right to do that. So I'm simply saying, rather than tinker at the laws and saying from which perspective are they coming from, let's make the laws that can save lives and make a difference and now work.
Yes, you're in a different landscape. Me, I was referring in relation to, for example, education, right? ETVF for education, what's not, this and that. But then if you look at the education that we are being given to, it is not one that is socialist. It is not one that is decolonial. It's one that's very capitalist, that actually locks us deeper into the mentality of serving private entities and not our own economic liberation.
Yeah.
That's what I mean with in terms of perspective. Where are we going to? What are we driving to?
Yeah.
And what tools are we using? And all of these things are not intrinsically in the Constitution.
But you can't put...
I feel like we can, though. Why can't we?
But I think when you fail at implementation...
Yes.
Okay? When you fail at implementation, you can write the laws to include every word you want and cover everything. When there is no accountability...
Yes, we agree on that.
Yeah.
We agree on that.
So that is why for me, I am saying, look at the young people, the young kids who have fallen into toilets.
Yes.
When the law has always said
Dignity.
there's also a zero paying fees schools. Okay? So I'm saying at some point, the activism we need is beyond the laws.
Yes.
Let's work at the laws that we have, because we've got progressive ones. And the only reason I am mentioning that is the fact that I wouldn't want us to tinker any minute more at refining the laws that we have, when in fact you know that even with perfect laws, there is no implementation. And I want to say there is no political will for implementation, and there is no accountability. Okay?
I think we must stretch ourselves into these two groups because they matter the most. Like for instance, the amendment of Section 25 in our Constitution that's in regards to land, is one of the examples to show that there's still a way to go about addressing the legislation and the constitution that we already have to be more progressive. That can be this group on the one side, and on the other side there should be implementers, right? People who are, I think we can have a good collaboration, because if we abandon one aspect and focus on the other, then I don't think we are doing justice to truly finding liberation completely.
Fair enough. I emphasize implementation because even with the land issue, it is, as people say, the devil is in the detail. So we can all go, whenever you are with a white person, people say, get us the land. But who's going to manage the land? How is it going to be managed? I mean, just the other day, yesterday, in the news, they are saying the ex-president is saying everything with the Guptas happened because of BEE. So can you see? He's now using one aspect of the law to implement thuggery. I mean, we know it's a legal defense, but I'm using it as an example to be saying, for me, yes, where the laws do not stretch wide enough, let's do that. But I think if I was to analyze the problem with a country, where I come to the United Nations and I hear them talk about the laws, I want to say our laws are very progressive, and they were crafted by men and women who were looking forward into a South Africa we all dreamed of, especially pre-democracy. The biggest problem becomes, who are we?
But they're still there. Those people are talking about are actually still alive.
Yes, but
and they're still leading. So can we truly say?
No. Well, I'm not too sure if they are still leading.
What I'm saying is, can we say that they had a picture of a good South Africa if implementation is really cuffing them? I think in rhetoric, I think that's one of the things that's really annoying for me and many other young people. We always hear these good things, always, and we agree that implementation is a big backlog, right? So I can't even begin to credit them even for these things, because now, what do we do with them? What does a girl from a rural area do with good laws?
We agree with that, but we are not starting where many other African countries are starting.
True.
Okay? We are not in Uganda where you can be hunted down legally for being gay.
Yes.
Are you being killed?
Yes.
Are you being raped as a lesbian woman?
Yes.
Of course you are. And that is, I think we are saying the same thing.
We are.
Except that I am saying, with the laws that we have, let there be political will.
Yes, we agree on that.
Let there be political will to implement.
We agree on that.
And let there be accountability. Yeah. But back to our reflection about the event. I mean, I think there was effort made to bring young people.
Yes.
But I also think that different countries, including ours, need to ask ourselves about how do we get meaningful youth
definitely
in forums like these.
Definitely. And somebody raised it, even called the youth dialogue. Like, what is the criteria that's used? And secondly, why is the underrepresentation of the very people that we are meeting because of? You know, we are talking about women living in rural areas, and yet they're the most underrepresented group in the space. You know, I think the UN still needs to hash those tiny logistics. But even the SG spoke about Antonio Oguti, you know, we need to open up the space even much more.
The UN itself.
Yes.
Because all the ministers who are representing countries, and even the executive director of UN Women, Pumzile, spoke about it, is how do we make sure that leadership in our own countries basically includes young people.
Yes.
Yeah, because that is one thing that came up about the age of some of the heads of state and the age of some of the ministers who are here. And I think it's becoming very clear that there is a almost like a discord in terms of even the official government representatives. Who are they representing? What age are they? Which ideology they themselves hold? How credible are they? But on the overall, I think the spaces, with all the limitations that we are talking about, in my view, the spaces that we got into, the meetings we got into, and there are just too many. When you are a small team, we were to attend, but at least every day it gave us a sense in the spaces that we were a part of just how worthwhile attending these meetings at a global level, or where global issues, geopolitical issues, are being discussed.
I think one of my highlights as well was the space that Rosaria created.
Yes.
You know, Rosaria is one of the institutions or organizations that we had an affiliation with for the UN conference from Zimbabwe. The space there was absolutely amazing on most days because, first of all, we sit on the ground, we talk of our shoes. That's just the aesthetics of it. But the conversations as well, you know, to talk about pads and menstruation and why do we hide pads. You can see it as something that's really small, right? But it has a big impact on our psyche as Black girls and how we think about our bodies and how we feel that our blood is violence, which also adds on to the whole patriarchal psyche that we need to hide ourselves and essentially hide from the world and be as small as we can and invisible in the world. You know, we addressed issues of hypervisibility as Black girls, as Black women, and also intergenerational conversations, which I think are still important. You know, because we have women living in one world and young women living in another world. So the amalgamation of both, I think, meant a lot for me, and I definitely want this relationship that me and you have going on.
I'm so happy you mentioned the Rosario space, a sacred space in a lot of ways, and I also liked its fluidity.
Yes.
Because in a lot of ways the sessions were, for lack of a better word, rigid in how, you know, it's a session, there's a panel, people attend.
Yes.
But the Nambiti space was actually quite fluid.
Yes.
And it allowed for different conversations to happen. Some of them quite lively.
Some informal.
Informal. And they were really led by what young people wanted to discuss. I found the partnership that we created with the Rosario Trust, I want to believe that it's one that we can basically take forward as two organizations in southern in Southern Africa. I also, I think, cherished the moments we could also meet with other people very informally and speak and talk and discuss a number of issues. I was also, I must say, I found it very astounding, the openness and the accessibility of the UN Women team and Mampunzile. I mean, I must say, sometimes leadership is what you observe. It's not what people say, but how you observe how they conduct themselves. You know, her availability even at the youth forum for the entire day, being a panelist, but also her openness to interact with young people from different places. The laid back openness in which I found her and her team interacting with everybody was
I think
quite
it's
good.
one thing to put in the books, especially for people who want to be in leadership. You know, like you have to go to the ground. You have to know what the people are saying. You have to know the ideas. In fact, who are you leading? That's the question, really. And where are you leading them to? You know, you can't decide for people the destination you want to take them to. They have to decide for themselves. Essentially, that's what, you know, I get from the whole thing of being accessible and being amongst the people. But I really think Soul City is doing that already. If we had to be honest, you know, with the 7 Rise clubs in 7 provinces, with young girls coming together, you can even check out some of there was an event this past weekend. You know, interacting with youth. You know, you can also check that out on Twitter. I think essentially that's what we want to get to a point where our discussions don't just happen on our TV screens. They don't just happen on Twitter, but we actually see the people that we put in power, and then we become the people that are in power. You know, I think that's another thing that really stood out for me as well. We don't want to just be people that vote, no. And it's also something that we've been talking about, that girls must be very politically active, because we've been socialized to think that politics is a world that happens there. You just see them happen. In fact, it looks like it's inaccessible. You know, you see parliaments and political leaders and you're like, yo, it's so far. It even becomes something that's very exaggerated in our minds. Looking like we can't get to that place, you know, of leading society at that level. But it's actually very accessible in terms of involving yourselves politically first step. You know?
I think that's important. But I also think that organizations like us, and that's why I'm excited about Not Yet Ururu, is also how do we bring the voices of young people in the work that we do. And I must say, while I lead Soul City, from its beginning, that was what Soul City was about. We are not experts in the lives of the people. So even our television dramas are informed by research done with our own with people. And our social mobilization is about including you know, the people that we serve. And I'm very happy that we found a way in which we can be here and we can really bring snippets. These were just small snippets of what CSW is. And I think one of the criticisms with previous CSWs, and I know that other comrades and colleagues who are here from other civil society organizations like Bafana Kumalo and Steve Litzike also feel very strongly about that CSW needs to live beyond these 2 weeks that officials and civil society organizations spend in New York. We need to take this back. We need to have a report back. We need to say what is the program of action based on the commitments and the statement that we have crafted. As you say again, and I think that is where I am saying we are very good at putting laws, but we don't implement. So even with CSW, for me is
we have to
how do we go back home, report back on CSW to different constituencies, but make sure that that becomes a program of action. Let's be very honest, and I know there are challenges with budget, but one of the questions that many women in South Africa have asked, at least on social media, is what is the role of the Department of Women in South Africa? You know? Is it even relevant? Does it have the resources, both human and financial
Yeah.
to really move us forward. We haven't seen it.
Yeah.
We really haven't
really
seen
haven't.
it. You know, and so what are the conversations that we need to have in South Africa,
Yeah.
particularly if the presidency is going to say we've got the I don't know whether it's a ministry of women
Within
the presidency.
the president's office, yes.
You know, if it was elevated there, what then is its role?
Yes.
And how are these discussions? Today, Athena and other colleagues are launching a toolkit on what women want. How are we going to take those tools
And I
back
think-
to the country
Yeah.
and implement what women want? And for me, that is my issue.
Yeah.
Okay? Where there are laws that are progressive, that other people are looking at and saying, wow, South Africa, look at your laws. Let there be implementation and let there be accountability where people are not implementing
Yes.
what is in their mandate
Yes.
to implement. And part of what you are saying about young people being in politics, for me, is young people need to know what their rights are. Young people need to know that a councillor, a mayor, they are public servants.
Yes.
They are doing
They're
this.
not superstars.
Yes, they are doing this for you. They are servants.
They are our employees.
They are our employees.
Essentially.
Exactly. And we've got the right to have this information. If we want a difference in our communities, we have a right to have access to the integrated development
Yeah.
plan that every municipality needs to have. Interrogate it. Look at it and say, why does my clinic not have drugs?
Yes.
Why is this happening? Why is my police station not having this? Where are you putting money in? We must stop our government officials thinking that to attract young people is to put them in stadiums, get a Kwaito star and t-shirts
Yeah.
and KFC. And then you think you've done an event
Yeah.
for young women. We need to involve young people, especially young women, in all decision-making processes. But we also need to politicize young women so that they can also demand some of these services that they need.
Yes, definitely. More mentioning the women's department, women's ministry. You know, I think also going back home, then we need to engage them even further because hearing them speak here almost calms me. But because I know the realities of our country, then it angers me at the same time. You know, it's the whole thing of legislation with no implementation, where they wave around we can terminate the safe institutions, you know, the safe houses for women who've been abused and children who've been abused. But the reality is that there's no access.
Yeah.
You know, and even if there are those institutions, do rural girls, the women in rural areas have access to them? Do girls in Mamelodi and Kailicha have access to them? No, they don't. We don't have access to these things. And now, to almost seem like we are moving in the right direction when we are stagnant with just things on paper, there has to be a deeper conversation. And I absolutely agree with you that we have to engage them, in fact confront them and demand these things that they wave around and applaud themselves for in our absence. You know, I'm glad we were here because it meant that many of you guys were here with us, you know, because then we can see these things. You know, we weren't here for the past 62 years or 61 conferences, but for the second one we're here and we engage on these issues. And I think, you know, it definitely has to get much more deeper than this in terms of interaction, integration, and implementation. We have a long way to go, and as young people, we have to be in the forefront of absolutely everything. No fear, because we are not yet Uhuru.
Absolutely. Exactly. It's not yet Uhuru. The struggle continues. But thank you so much for going on this journey with us. We absolutely enjoyed it.
And stay tuned for other content on our social media pages. Check out our social media pages. Twitter at SoulCity_SA, and on Facebook, Soul City Institute. Sinani, guys, we got you out here, and we want you to be part of the conversation as well.
Absolutely.
Be part of the work. Join the UN, join the Soul City group, be involved, and let's change this world one step at a time, because at the end of the day, we are the ones that have to live with the outcomes of living in this country.
Yeah.